I remember when I was small, maybe 8, 10 years old, when the new church here was being built. They had jacked up the original church and moved it over toward the road over here. And this particular time was in the summertime. This building was being built almost on the site of the old church. Part of this building was on the old site. And when I was a kid, I loved to run. And I could look out the window of that old church and looked at over here, and I was so hot and thirsty, I told Mom I could drink a church full of water. But some have asked about the two buildings that sat outside and back. I remember those buildings well. For Sunday school, I remember when those buildings were no longer needed and they got rid of them, whether they sold them or I don't know how they got them, but my grandmother got them. And her youngest son used them as chicken houses.
I've been told that when they built this church, they used a mule and a hand duct scoop blade. That's how they dug the basement with that. They didn't have a bulldozer. They just used it with an old mule and that hand scoop.
Yeah. I wondered why the thing sat so high.
But they didn't have bulldozers then, so they used the mule and the scoop hand.
And I remember every Sunday we would congregate in what's the chapel now. And at that time, one of the superintendent of Sunday school was Pat's uncle, Clarence. And he would stand up front and the children would file out, start with the little ones and go all the way up each grade and go to their Sunday school class.
The buildings, as far as the buildings, when we were here first, was just to that wall right there. You know, we were this was our sanctuary. And the classrooms were, but we weren't here 125 years ago. But close to it.
But I know as a very young little girl, we used to have Sunday school assembly. And you would meet before Sunday school began, and you'd have, at that time, the church superintendent, who was Mr. Clarence Wicker, and that was Betty Good's brother, and he was superintendent for years, and he would have the birthday collection and all kinds of stuff. And then he would always call on either Mr. Walt Yoakley. Mr. Walt Yoakley was his grandfather to Wayne Heath, or he would call on Mr. Kent Pigram. And Mr. Kent Pigram is brother-in-law to Miss Frances Miller. So those two gentlemen could just lead in the most beautiful prayers. I mean, they were just poetic. And even as a child, you listened, and it was just beautiful.
When we were in the MYF, Jewel and Louis Neal were our...
That's Lisa Chandler's mother.
Lisa Chandler's mother and father were our... sponsors or chaperones or leaders.
They were, yeah. But, you know, I think about it, and we were, there are quite a few of us that are still together, that grew up together and were in youth together, and, you know, we're still in the church, in the same church.
And I went to Lake Junaluska as president of our MYF and represented our church when I was a junior in high school. That was very nice.
Later on, I was the youth counselor.
Our times out here with the youth, I remember we used to do the spring follies. I believe that was probably in the early 80s before I'd actually come into the youth, but I believe Mom and Dad were counselors then. And it was a big spring production, and we had it in the chapel, and a lot of good times there. The other thing would be in what is today the youth room. It used to be our fellowship hall, and we would have big homecoming lunches there, and we would get the entire congregation, 400 or 500 people, down there and have a big meal after the homecoming sermon.
We had people coming out of the windows and everywhere, but we all fitted in there, didn't we?
You did, we did, and had a good time. And I know the kids after that would go out into the yards and playground area and spend the afternoon playing with each other. So those are some that come to mind for me.
Good evening, folks. I'm Reverend Dave Cash here at Sedge Garden United Methodist Church on it's in October of 2012, and sitting with me, I'm the senior minister at Sedge Garden, and we're looking at the contents of our time capsule was stored here behind our cornerstone, and Mr. Ray Cates, it was the superintendent who was in charge of our last building program and also of this building program. And then Norma Freeman is with us, and so Norma is with our Archives and History Committee, and so today we want to talk a little bit about something we found in the box. And what we found in the box was a message from Mr. Cates, and so I'm going to ask Norma to go ahead and open it, and we're going to read and see what all he had to say back then and just talk a little bit about it. Yeah, this has the strategic plan, which was made in 1958. And it says on here, my daddy, Ray C. Cates, was chairman of the building committee that helped build this church. By Martha Jane Cates, which is his daughter. And we have a picture of her. She was one of in the time capsule. She was 5th grade at the time, I think in Brownies or something like that. Well, Norma, see if you can read that for us. We'll help you if we need to.
This is a copy of the remarks I made at the formal opening and the cornerstone laying at the sanctuary. Ray C. Cates, chairman of the building committee. I would like to welcome our guests who are with us today, and at the same time say it surely looks good to see so many of our home folks here also. We are indeed grateful that so many of our invited guests made a special effort to be with us here today on this important occasion. We hope you will find your visit pleasant and enjoyable, and that you will come to see us again. This is one of the few times in my life when I find it difficult to choose the words I want to say, yet I really do want to say something. I'm sure no one here is a happy one, as happy as I am on this occasion, yet at the same time, I am sad. There's a certain sadness, I believe, when we move from the old to the new. They talk about moving forward, and I'm all for it. But at the same time, it is good to take a look backward. I'm sure at the old church, there are many fond memories for the people in our congregation who have been here for many years. Those who were at the altar there and those who joined the church there, those that we and who have since brought their children to be baptized there. These folks surely must have a feeling today which some of our friends and newer members do not share. This is not to say that we want to dwell in the past, for surely I could not have done my small part in the building program unless I was looking to the future. However, I think it is foolish one who advises to look forward only and never look back. It takes a look into the past to see and appreciate the fine heritage which we have, and to recognize that those who have gone on before are truly responsible for what we are and what we have today.
Well, that's very good there, Brother Ray. So that was your speech that you made. You told me a while ago before we started that y'all went to Duke Chapel over on the campus of Duke University, and that's really where you got the idea and the design for this building.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that trip, a little bit about what inspired y'all to pick that place.
Well, the architect, we assigned the architect the duty to build a building not exactly like the Duke Chapel, but somewhat. And it was done that way.
You had mentioned that you had served in about every position in the church. Over the years, what do you think has been your favorite part of serving? Which one job did you like better than the others?
People accepted me.
People accepted you, didn't they?
I worked, I taught school 1 year, and after 1 year was over, the superintendent of schools said, "I don't know much about you, Mr. Cates, but I understand you get along with everybody." So that was my long sweep.
That was your long sweep. Well, that's a pretty good thing. And evidently the people of this church, you said when you came in, they just sort of, when you became a member of this congregation, they immediately took to you and started dumping stuff off on you, jobs for you to do, and it sounded like people had a lot of faith in you, though.
Well, my wife was a vocalist,
Oh, was she?
and she was in the choir and everything. It was sung at weddings and funerals and everything.
Let me add to that, her wife was also a Sunday school teacher, is that
yeah.
correct? She was my first Sunday school
Oh.
teacher, and what a pleasure. And then I had her sister, Ruth,
Yeah,
as a Sunday school teacher.
yeah, all of them were involved in church,
Right,
weren't
yes. I didn't have him as a teacher, but I knew him as one of the best.
Well, and certainly Mr. Cates is highly respected here. And I believe you just turned 88 years young here a couple of weeks ago, celebrating your
right.
birthday. So what a special
October
occasion.
6th.
October the 6th, yes. Today's the 17th. It's just been a couple of weeks then. How about that? Well, thank you on behalf of the church for what all you have done all these many years and your gifts of service, and certainly for that address, because you just summed up what we wanted to hear about this particular building, built in 1967.
Back in the early 70s when Pat and Grady Sink were helping out with their youth group. And of course I've always had been involved with music, with the children's choir, Mr. Bunning here back in the 60s. But Pat and Grady put together a group that we called the New Way Singers. And we were inspired by a group called the New Directions, which was a group out of Burlington, college-age kids, and we'd seen them at a couple of different times. And I remember actually going up to a church, I think it was off of Walltown or Sprague Street, and seeing the New Directions. And at that time, that's when I really gave my life to Christ. It seemed like at one of their concerts. But it inspired us, and we formed the New Way Singers and performed here and throughout the area. I remember going to Cherokee one time and singing up there on the reservation and going down the beach and taking a bus trip down there and singing with the New Way Singers. And again, that just kind of instilled more love for music and playing for the church and at that time. And I thank Grady Sink and Pat for what they did at that time and for leading us in the right direction with the New Way Singers.
My name is Bob Stratton. I'm a videographer for in the main sanctuary at the church. I'm here every Sunday. I do the videos. I videotape the Sunday services, and I've been doing that for a number of years. I've been with the church for 40-some years, and I guess you call me an old-timer, but anyway, I have been with them, and and I enjoy what I do. Back in Joe Davis' time, the Reverend Joe Davis, that was years ago. I remember that I used to run across the street. I was so excited to videotape and the Sunday services and the first service I ever done. I used my own camera, and the choir came out and they all looked up at the balcony and they wondered, who in the world is that? What's he doing? And that was where it started from.
This isn't about the church itself, but we had a lady who had a trailer and had a covered wagon thing over it. And she'd go around through the neighborhood picking up kids and bring them to Bible school. And you had to be in the upper class to get into that thing because everybody wanted to ride that wagon.
Yeah, I remember Miss Ethel teaching Sunday school.
Mm-hmm. She taught the nursery for years and years and years.
Yeah, Neil Holder.
Neil
did
had the
too.
next class,
And,
the 4-year-olds.
that was in, Neil taught out in the old buildings behind. I remember that.
I'm just saying that one good thing that happens always, our church is always very concerned about everybody else. An example, 4 months ago I had a stroke, and I've never gotten so many cards and visits and calls and food, and it was wonderful to know that you're loved that way. And I think that's one of the good things about our church is that we come together when someone has a problem, or good things as well as bad things. You know, I thought that ended up being a good thing because I really felt very blessed to have had all that happen.